The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Azali Assoumani, President of the Union of the Comoros. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, j'ai l'honneur de souhaiter la bienvenue à son Excellence.
On behalf of the Assembly, I welcome His Excellency Mr. Azali Assoumani, President of the Union of the Comoros, and I invite him to take the floor.
President of the General Assembly, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Majesties, Highnesses, Excellencies, heads of governments, distinguished representatives of countries and institutions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah ta'ala wa barakatuh. It is a real pleasure for me to address you here today, and I would like to first thank the American authorities. We thank you very warmly for the warm welcome that we see every time we are here in New York in order to participate in this great annual gathering of the international community. Next, I would like to express my very warm congratulations to His Excellency Mr. Dennis Francis and congratulate him on being brilliantly elected to preside over the 78th session of a regular session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. And I'm all the more happy to do so since this is a distinguished representative of an island developing state. My country is one as well, and we now have such a person assuming a high office. There's no doubt, Your Excellency, that your professional qualities and your experience, together with the particular sensitivity you have when it comes to development issues, which is a characteristic of a person coming from an island, will be a token of success of this current session. I would like to also use this opportunity to pay a much-deserved tribute to your predecessor, His Excellency Mr. Csaba Kőrösi. Congratulate him on the effectiveness with which he has discharged his high duty on behalf of us all. And finally, I would like to, on behalf of my country and the African Union, express all of my thanks to His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. We thank him for his constant engagement in the engagement of all of his teams in the service of our common institution for the benefit of one and all. Distinguished delegates, as a chairperson of the African Union, I would like to today, in front of this august assembly, express the voice of all of the African states. It continues believing in fair and more effective multilateralism because it is more inclusive and therefore can help bring about longed-for deep changes that we all wish for because we want a better life for the continent and the entire world. And this will be realized, we are convinced, in an in-depth reform of the United Nations system. Africa, where 3.8 billion people will live by the end of this century, intends to play a crucial role in attaining the SDGs and therefore has the right to participate in global decision-making bodies and to, inter alia, be on the Security Council as a permanent member and thus realize its rights in line with the Essolvini Consensus. It is a question of equity. This reform of the United Nations that Africa has been asking for loudly and clearly, but it's also a question of effectiveness because it becomes a matter of legitimacy and therefore of the effectiveness of multilateralism. I would like to furthermore use this opportunity so as to reiterate on behalf of Africa our thanks, very sincere thanks, to the members of the G20, who have just integrated the African Union, which it is my honor to chair in this year 2023, within their group. And this diplomatic victory for Africa, but also for the G20, through India, where this historic decision was enacted, gives us hope, especially at the time where a synergy of actions is needed in order to get our countries out of this socio-economic stalemate. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this 78th General Assembly, rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, accelerating action of the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all, this theme is very timely. The African continent is facing numerous challenges, and there is a danger that these challenges can compromise its future. And I think that the trust and the solidarity which has pride of place this year will provide us with the solutions which are adequate for our concerns. We are dealing with the challenge of food security, which is becoming wider and wider spread in the continent, despite the fact that we have immense arable lands on the continent, despite the fact that we have qualified and competent labor aplenty. Despite this, food insecurity continues affecting millions of people. Climate change and the numerous conflicts on the continent compound this situation, as does the Russian-Ukrainian war, which brought in its wake the disruption of supplies of grain and fertilizer, and also brought in its wake an unprecedented inflation. You will agree with me that it's inconceivable that with all of these arable lands, the continent remains a major importer of agricultural goods, and this contributes towards us creating a sizable shortfall in its trade balance. Therefore, at the time when we're talking about solidarity, it is time for all partnerships amongst African governments, development bodies, private sector, both foreign and domestic, be strengthened so as to rise to this challenge and resolve it effectively and in a lasting fashion. It is also high time for our partners to support us in implementing far-reaching reforms, such as, for example, the transfer of expertise and technology, so as to help those countries which are severely affected, help us promote agricultural development, and more specifically, produce and transform our goods locally, thus adding value to them and helping us combat shortages and famine. We also need to strengthen our fight against climate change because, and we live through it, all of us, our planet is constantly dealing with various climate events, and more specifically cyclones, floods, earthquakes, rising waters, droughts, and the list is far from exhaustive. Frequent disasters, of course, have devastating effects on our economies, on our social infrastructure, on our agriculture, and on our people, in particular the most vulnerable, and brings in its wake public health crises, which further underscore the vulnerability of the continent. I would like to use this opportunity to renew our deep condolences and also our solidarity to our brothers in the Kingdom of Morocco and in Libya. Their country have just suffered enormous human losses and material damages in the wake of such natural disasters. I'm also thinking of the many countries in Europe and Asia and in America who are hard hit by the devastating consequences of forest fires, of floods, and storms. Above and beyond the numerous human losses, the damages resulting from these catastrophes require the cost of rebuilding and recovery, which is not always something that our countries can sustain. I therefore call upon the international community to promote communal approaches, better structured and adapted, and especially within the framework of funding, to meet these disasters on a large scale so that we can provide our people with the support that they need and help them recover. And especially, I call for the effective implementation of the recommendations having to do with the protection and safeguarding of the environment, for the implementation of the commitments undertaken in the area of adaptation and mitigation. The lowering of the level of the greenhouse effects and the funding pledged to combat climate change have to, in fact, be translated in specific actions if we want to live in future in a world which is safer and more prosperous. I call, therefore, for support to the Moroni Declaration issued last June on blue economy and the Nairobi Declaration of last September, and this to make sure that the countries can defend with one voice their common interests and helps develop sustainably, in particular to do this during the upcoming COP28 in Dubai, to which we would like to wish every success. And finally, I would like to launch an appeal to strengthen the capacities of UN Habitat. I'm asking for more substantial support in the implementation of the new urban agenda so that this agenda can better support our African cities, which are full of potential, but which have become very vulnerable to climate change. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot talk about the challenges of the African continent without talking about the political and security situation and complex and worrying situation on our continent, and in particular in the Sahel. As we all know, the Sahel, this region of Africa, which since 2010 has been seriously affected by insecurity and terrorism. They are terrorist groups who have intensified their attacks against security forces, but also against civilians and civilian infrastructure. It is urgent, therefore, that the international community should strengthen its efforts aimed at accompanying us in our attempts to stabilize this region, knowing that the global planetary village in which we all live, that on this planet, crises are very easily imported and therefore have consequences on economies and the investment within and between countries. Of course, first and foremost, it's up to the Africans to implement the economic and social development plans within the framework of Agenda 2063, so as to better combat poverty and youth unemployment, but especially to make sure that the young people do not become hostages to all kinds of extremism. However, it is also the duty of the international community to support Africa in this action, because our efforts need to be pooled if we are to stand the chance of being effective. In addition to terrorism, unfortunately, Africa is also facing the resurgence of anti-constitutional changes. They compromise and undermine democracy, peace, security, stability, and our socio-economic development. And it is in this regard that the African Union has undertaken sanctions against those who commit such acts, and demands a rapid return to constitutional order in the countries concerned. And I would like to here recall solemnly that a political life worthy of its name is not possible without respecting electoral timetables and legitimate institutional mechanisms which undergird a democratic public life. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, Africa, of course, is under all these pressures, but we are fighting for our regional integration to stop the economic stalemate. The economic shocks that our countries underwent, in particular inflation and logistical and food crises, have seriously affected our growth potential. our daily life for our people and the stability of our states. And it is in this regard that since 2021, we have been implementing the African Continental Free Exchange Area, a major continental common market, and this is with a hope to give new impetus to growth and African GDP. Having this tool at our disposal, it is my task to accelerate during the time that I'm chairperson of the AU for the continent and using this tool to create the needed wealth to better handle our demographic growth. This area will contribute to the implementation of our common ambition to move towards industrializing the continent, because Africa has to stop being a simple provider of raw materials. Whilst enabling us to strengthen our secondary and tertiary sectors to create jobs, the common market area on the continent would also stimulate technology transfer and promote foreign investment, because it will open for other continent immediate access to a market of more than 1 billion people. And here I would like to reiterate our request for support and strengthening of a strategic partnership between Africa and the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, even making its institutional and put together a joint AU-CELAC commission. This partnership will not only strengthen cooperations between South-South, but in the mutual interest of our states, it would also help us to capitalize on the partnership with our friends and brothers in the North. Similarly to the rest of the world, African countries need more than ever peace and security to be able to have better living conditions. Peace and development will also result through resolving our political and territorial problems which have to do with the sovereignty of states and the dignity of nations. It was these concerns that pushed us, me and my African partners, to go to a meeting with President Zelensky and Putin within the framework of the mission for African peace last June in Kiev and St. Petersburg, respectively. We therefore stand ready to support any and all other initiatives aimed at ending this war, which negatively impacts our goals to increase the well-being of our people. Let me also reiterate, once again, with the goal of safeguarding peace and stability, and on behalf of the African Union, that there is a high need to come up with a just and fair solution to the issue of Palestine, a solution which would enshrine the right of the Palestinian people to have a sovereign state living in perfect harmony and security with the State of Israel. I would like to recall here also very solemnly, as chairperson of the African Union and the Union of the Comoros, the Comorian nature of the Île of Mayotte. And I recall that in order to move forward on this, we opted for a dialogue with the French party, so as to find a solution to this disagreeable dispute, and to do so in the interest of both countries. I would like to underscore my determination, a determination of my government, to honor the institutions and the democratic life in the Comoros by organizing free, transparent, and democratic upcoming presidential elections and governors' elections in 2024. I would like to also recall that the Union of the Comoros managed to put an end to this cycle of political instability, which used to be the characteristic of our political life since independence in 1975. And this was done thanks to the policy of national reconciliation that I have been conducting since 2000. This policy of reconciliation, supported by the African Union, the United Nations, and all of our partners, have brought stability to the country, and it is our duty to build on it and to sustain it. Since 2002, in fact, the date of the 26th of May have become a symbolic date of the transfer of power in the Comoros, because it is on this date we have the transfer of power as resulting from free and transparent presidential elections. It is with this concern in mind, the concern to preserve peace and stability and democracy in the Union of the Comoros, that I am asking once again for your support and your accompaniment so that the upcoming presidential elections and the election of governors planned for the month of December and January next should be conducted under good conditions. To conclude, let me say that I am confident that on the 26th of May 2024, we will once again celebrate the political maturity of the people of the Comoros, and that the inauguration ceremony of the next president of the Union of the Comoros will symbolize the deep rootedness and the strength of our democracy. I thank you.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale, je tiens à...
On behalf of the General Assembly, I would like the President of the Union of the Comoros for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.